Honor the mountain. Shake the pillars of heaven. Crack their resolve. Sometimes life is worth dying.
Shut down.
Beauty is a job well done.
Today we have a meta breaker. This is Lightrocket2. All of his links will be in the description below, but right now we've got him in a Discord call to answer some questions I have from him about his recent exposure and climb through North American Challenger. If you enjoy this type of educational content where I interview high elo players and ask about their champion and strategies, leave some feedback in the comments on who you'd like to see next or any suggestions or any criticisms you may have. At the time of recording, he currently sits at 1085 LP in North American Challenger, making his off-meta pick working one of the most competitive regions in the world versus professional and academy players. With enough introduction, I want to thank him for his time and look forward to his insight into his champion and his playstyle. Welcome, man.
Yeah, thank you for the welcome. I'll just give a nice intro. Obviously, he gave it for me already. I am a Challenger Taric jungle player, well-known North American one-trick, I suppose. I have a various amount of strategies that I use, different runes, different strategies, sometimes even going support, going spellbook with smite and jungle, of course. We're going to be looking at a jungle game that I played versus Nocturne within the past week, obviously above that 1000 LP threshold. So, just to explain a little bit about Taric, his passive gives him 2 empowered auto attacks with double attack speed. So I simply clear the camp by doing Q auto spam. Very simply, right? Walk it over, smite, you get your E auto, Q auto, right? And so you just have this very repetitive Q auto spam. That's how Taric clears camps, and he needs that blue buff since this uses a ton of mana. So
Yeah, I was noticing that.
Just going to do a standard clear. You're going to see a little bit of a trick or something that happens at Raptors sometimes. I don't know if it actually happens in this game right away, but with Taric's W, he can chain himself to an ally and cast his Q and E and R off of them, and you can use this to heal the mid laner. So they look pretty healthy, so I don't know if I'll do it. Yeah, maybe just WQ, give him a nice little heal, right? It's Kiana who's melee versus Victor who's ranged, so she'll be poking him, right? So I just decide, okay, it's I'm just going to be healing the Kiana, right?
Yeah.
Like this. They're aware of this strategy, so he's here to fight me while I attempt to do this.
So this is what I find really interesting about this champion. Obviously, I don't know. I'm a Riven one trick. I don't know a whole ton about Taric. So those sort of like little tricks are really interesting to me as a player who sees Taric from the outside in, sort of thing. We'll jump into the first sort of question as we're kind of just like going through our clear, nothing crazy happening. Have you always mained Taric, and where did your name Lightrocket come from?
So I started in the end of season 4, and eventually I would become a diamond 4 Alistair and Janna support player, and I eventually got beat to death by a Taric. I'll just break out of this for a second to say that a Raptor trick on the enemy Raptors is pretty rare, but it's just a good usage there. But anyway, I was a diamond Alistair player, and I got beat to death by a Taric support, and I went, what the hell was that? And
I've said that multiple times watching your stream last game. I think I typed in chat when you were just like doing these insane 1v1s and 2v1s and stuff, and your champion just like didn't take damage and was doing all this damage and healing and shields and crazy stuff.
So I'll answer the question, but of course, that 2v2 ended up being a double kill. Midwave got shoved in, and wait a second, I just realized the scoreboard is not updating. Oh. Here, I'll every once in a while I'll hit tab.
Oh yeah, nice. Yep.
It seems like it was not updating, but yeah, I got both those kills, so I picked up Bammies and Tyr.
Tyr's very integral in the build, isn't it?
Right. So this game I'm going Phase Rush, and I will just simply proc Phase Rush and use it to reposition or run away. But enough about the build. The question you asked as far as so I got beat to death as a Taric. Or by a Taric in the support lane, and then I just decided, hey, I'm going to pick him up. And at the time, Presence of Mind was you would gain 8 to 9 seconds of unlimited mana anytime you got a kill or leveled up. So at blue buff, I would, kill blue buff, and then I would have infinite mana to do the Gromp. And so Taric jungle was busted way back then, and no one knew.
Very interesting enough. And that obviously, like, what it transitioned him into your Taric jungle phase. Is that what you mean? Like from there?
Right. So I'll let this play out for a second, but yeah. So I escape there, use phase rush to get away. And they kill him, and then we all get away. Or this fight is going to last even longer.
It's such an interesting champion to watch in these skirmishes. Like, these random heals and shields that come out all the time, they just make these fights look so just like, they're just so like non-League of Legends early game skirmishes, you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, such a cool champion to watch, actually. And this is like a really high KP game, so we're going to see a lot of fighting, which is kind of what we're in for.
Yeah, I basically had this one clip. It's if you search my channel, you can find it. It says something like that glimmer of hope you see, that's me. It's a clip where I basically decided after that game that I was going to main Taric jungle because it was just an incredible like 1v2 style clip. And yeah, eventually I would go on to hit Grandmaster and eventually now Challenger with it.
Yeah, you've done very well. Your last 2 months, I think you've gained like 800 LP.
Yeah, it's been wild.
Yeah,
you can attribute a little bit of that to some Taric buffs and me just playing well. But I'll answer your other question too here soon.
No,
yeah, so I smited Dragon. I had to, right, to live, and he knew that, so he's trying to smite steal it, but we punish him for walking up and he dies.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, you were asking about the Light Rocket, how the name came to be.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that was it's not as interesting as you think. It's just I was a 7-year-old and making a account on RuneScape for the first time, and I decided to put adjective and noun together. And I used Rocket, which was a nickname a teacher had for me because I would come in like a rocket to like a summer school class. And so it was Rocket. And then I chose like various colors trying to find a name that would work. And so I chose like green, blue, red, and dark. And then I tried light, and light, only had a 2, where all the rest of them were like, hey, green rocket's taken. You want to be green rocket 4000? I was like, as a kid, I'm like, I'm not going to remember that many numbers. So. Yeah. When it said Light Rocket and it was taken, but 2 was available, I just went for it. And that was it. And I used that username for the majority of things throughout my years, but obviously I have other usernames here and there. But
no, I love that. It's always interesting to hear where people game. Like it's just something individual. It's something that holds a place in your heart. Like it's obviously something that we invest a lot of time into. So hearing origins is always really I don't know. I just like it. It's kind of like a wholesome side to you. It like humanizes you towards your champion. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, cool. So another thing that I want to touch on as well, I said, so part of this question is what made you pick Taric as a jungler, but we just went over that, luckily. So I know we've seen a lot of recent roaming Taric being played by Addy in Korean Challenger as a top laner. Was he part of your inspiration, or was that just like coincidental that the fact that you guys just played the same sort of thing?
I was actually, I've been playing Taric jungle since, I think, the end of Season 8-ish, and I've been playing Taric jungle since before he even played Taric top in the first place, which I think was like either late Season 9 or early Season 10. And so he wasn't an inspiration, it was just happenstance, I guess. Yep. The only real inspiration I get from him now is my current rune setup. The phase rush setup is very similar to what his rune setup is, and for the longest time I either went Aftershock or PTA or whatever, but his runes work very, very well in the current meta, so I've been kind of using them a lot.
Yeah, I agree. It's very utility based. That phase rush obviously helps you to disengage and then re-engage once your cooldowns are up. Run away till your ult's up or comes down, all that kind of thing. Synergizes very well with the champion. Yeah, nice.
I've seen a lot of Addy's gameplay playing Taric top, and it's not my style. I think that you need a certain type of gameplay to actually pull off Taric top effectively, because when you watch his games, he really just lanes until like level 4 or 5, and then at that point he'll just run bot, go with the jungler, dive the bot lane, like completely ignore top. And when you look at his games, you'll find that the enemy top laner is usually like the most fed person on the enemy team. And so, he's just like, he's constantly he becomes a roaming support more than top laner. Yeah. And, you can't really, I've tried it in NA, but one, I don't have the top macro or the top micro, whatever it needs to play top. But 2, also, I just don't like the roaming play style where I just have to sacrifice multiple waves just to hope for a bot lane play that my jungler in NA might not actually agree to going for,
Yep.
even though I always want to do it, right? People think I'm inting all the time, but realistically, what it comes down to is Taric just wants to fight all the time. If he's going to, do anything, he needs to auto attack. Taric is a movement speedless, self CCing melee, dashless champion. So he's incredibly slow, and he needs to constantly reset his autos with his passive to do anything. So if he's gonna die, he might as well run in and try to get as much healing and stuns and shielding off before he dies. And if he's not going to die, he's, and kill them, he still wants to go in and, constantly auto attack. So it's very hard for teammates to really realize when or not, like, I'm trying to actually fight to the death or fight, in an easy fight. And it's hard for teammates to really understand.
Yeah, it's
Sometimes.
also like that. You obviously knowing the limits of your champion more than your teammates as well. Like you see a situation that looks really in on like other champions, but then you see things that Taric can do. Obviously, like the tower dives that like Addy does look completely insane at like level 4 or 5, but then they end up working out. So it's just about you obviously knowing your limits better than your teammates, which is it's just
Right.
crazy. Yeah, the things this champion can do. Was there anything specific you changed or added to your playstyle that really saw you improve? Your OPGG says you've gained around 800 LP in just over 2 months. What was the foundation for this?
Well, probably just like, I was probably in a stage of trying out various builds, and I'll explain a little bit soon. I missed this stun, so I'm dead. But the reason for it really had a lot to do with 12.10, 12.11 changes. So 12.9, Taric was in a spot that I understood, and he was well and off and everything. And then 12.10 dropped, where the durability patch came in, and everyone's tankier now, and all the healing got nerfed, and Tark's Q healing got gutted, and the AP ratios are gone now, and the HP ratio was lower, and there was not really any other changes. And Taric had one of the lowest win rates in the game, even in a meta where he was supposed to be doing well, right? So during that period of time, trying to find different builds, testing out, hey, what can actually work, ending up losing a ton of games for wherever I was already at. In 12.10, and then 12.11 drops, where they released this buff for Taric, which they gave him his HP ratio back on his Q. They gave him a 2.25 second more stun on his E, as well as a lowered cooldown for it, and his Q was reduced to 60 mana flat at all ranks. And that is huge for jungle, because you're constantly using your Q, Q auto spam. So in the jungle, where he constantly is going it basically increased his clear speed effectively. And then I have a video where I do a 317 clear. So Taric's clear is now effectively the same speed or faster than normal meta junglers. So
Yeah, that's insane. Just like all those things combined, really.
Right. So it was a huge buff for Taric jungle, where it was just a minor buff for Taric support, and using that, obviously focusing up, grinding, I managed to climb all the way to 1000 LP.
Yeah, you've done very well.
So.
Like crazy. Like that kind of growth in 2 months must be really very rewarding to achieve. Obviously, challenge is a goal that a lot of us strive for. Next question we have is, so with Taric's current items, can you walk us through your build options? I've seen you go some kind of like off AD items. I've seen Death Dance, Derek's, all that kind of thing in there. What are his core items, and are there any drastic differences between role or enemy comp, or do you kind of just stick to one cookie cutter sort of build?
Right. So Taric is a champion that has tons of different types of scaling. He has his passive gives attack speed, so he's good with attack speed. He needs movement speed because he's incredibly slow. He needs mana because he burns mana. He has armor scaling. He has HP scaling. He has a little bit of AP scaling. He's really good with AD because of his passive. He has healing and shielding power scaling. So what it comes down to is a ton of different items are really, really good on Taric, and you can build almost anything. But because he's a jack of all trades, you have to figure out when is the best time for what item. So, it's like I'm facing a Trundle, for example. You asked about Death Dance, and Trundle will steal your resist, right? And he does max HP based damage. So one of the ways to deal with Trundle is to actually build Death Dance, because Death Dance tankiness doesn't come from the stats, it comes from the bleed. And Taric's ult can be used to nullify Death Dance's bleed. So, a team fight starts, they're all trying to burst you, you press R, and then the ult falls, and then even if you didn't get a kill yet to cleanse the bleed, your ult will block the damage from the bleed, so it effectively makes you tankier even with a damage dealing item. And some other rune setups are like if you're facing tons of range, lots of kiting. A very common build is to go Frostfire with Phase Rush into a variety of different builds, right? If they're AP heavy, you can pick up items like Wit's End or Force of Nature, and if they're AD heavy, you can rush Frozen Heart, skip the tier, and just go into Frostfire afterwards. So
Yeah. It's actually
that's
really
that's usually
sorry, I was just gonna say it
no,
sounds really
yeah.
comprehensive. Like I didn't realize I was so like the way you think about builds is really smart and it's very like adaptive, if that makes sense. Like your Death Dance reasoning's crazy. Like never even considered that. Obviously, when you get a takedown, it gives you the HP back that you're bleeding off. So the ult synergizes very well with Death Dance passive, and then the Frozen Heart obviously helps with these mana problems. Yeah, really smart. Sorry, you were gonna expand.
Yeah, so Taric needs a lot of mana, and so usually in a lot of builds he'll pick up tier, but the one build he doesn't pick up tier is Frozen Heart because Frozen Heart inherently has mana in it. So it's really effective to go Frozen Heart for multiple reasons because one, you don't have to buy tier at all. You can just buy the Frozen Heart and be good, and that saves you a good 400 gold. And two is that Taric's passive, which he clears with his E and his W, all scale with armor. So stacking armor very early before the enemy can pick up any kind of armor shred or armor pen is super effective against certain types of comps that don't deal true damage or are just can't build shred later. Like items like cleaver and any kind of shred item will deal with Taric very effectively. So certain kinds of champions can't build those items and he becomes almost just broken against them.
Yep.
Like a good example would be like Yasuo, Yon, melee champions that they just want fights to last a long time while they just auto attack from melee range, and that's exactly what Taric wants, and he counters those champions pretty well.
Yeah.
Because they also need to buy crit and can't really pick up items like cleaver or grudge or whatnot.
Yeah, picking up those early armor items as well, like an early tabby for skirmishes and stuff like that. I can obviously see being very strong versus those champions, especially in a 2v2 scenario where you're healing and shielding the enemy champion.
Right.
Sorry, your teammate. So because your champion plays a very supportive role, how do you look to get back in the game if your team falls behind?
I mean, you just play around Taric's ult, right? You're behind. It's like, okay, they do more damage than your team. You just have to, sometimes is it soul? Is it, do you have a split pusher? There's a variety of different ways to get back into the game when you're behind. But Taric obviously needs to be useful with an ally, and if you have no useful allies, you're just going to bleed out and lose. So, just trying to play around Taric's ult probably. Obviously, if they all deal damage and you nullify the damage, then you can get back into games.
Yeah.
But if they play around it well, then it will never happen.
Mm-hmm. So you'd kind of probably just suggest, I think like the biggest thing that we're touching on here is probably like your ability to pick fights where that maybe even if you're behind, your ult could be a turning tide for what could probably be a pretty doomed game. But if you can amplify like one carry or one champion on your team, that can probably do the work of 3 or 4 champions under your ult would probably be. So your fight selection is probably one of the biggest things you would say using your ult.
Right.
Yep, that totally makes a lot of sense. So for any beginner players looking to pick up Taric jungle, this is obviously champion's very, very strong at the moment with durability patch coming through. As you said before, that's obviously what's kind of given you the helping hand that you needed to push your champion above its limits. What would you recommend is a good way to start learning Taric jungle? Obviously, he's actually got a lot of niches that I didn't realize. As we've just all learned, there's like a lot of different things that you have to consider when you play this champion. What would you suggest?
So first, if you look at the mobile fire, I'll say that for people learning Taric jungle, the best rune setup to take is press the attack PTA setup, because with phase rush and with actually I'll let this fight play out first. This is a pretty good one if I remember right.
Walk us through it if you want.
Yeah, just phase rush proc. He's feared. She's gonna ult falls. No one can take damage. We're trying to finish off Sona. I'm just keeping Kiana alive while she's going invisible, right? They have no way to deal damage to her, even though she's building full damage, since she goes invisible plus my healing and shielding. And we just basically 2v4 here.
Your champion is a menace.
Yeah,
this is insane to watch.
That looks pretty fun.
It does.
Yeah, and
like
I had wits.
Like...
I had like Wit's End, right? So the Wit's End is dealing more damage, and it gives me a nice amount of magic resist to deal with the Leandry's max HP damage.
Yep.
Attack like lethal with Moonstone is kind of good. It's not a build we go right now, but the more attack speed Taric has, the faster he heals, the faster he shields and stuns and everything. So you know, people don't like try to build attack speed, but realistically, if you buy items like Ardent or whatnot, it's actually going to help you a lot. And so that's why I don't recommend like lethal or phase rush for new players, because when you get into lethal is really good for spam healing and shielding and stunning, but the additional attack speed becomes unmanageable, so it's really, you know, difficult to do. And phase rush, you need to be able to use that movement speed proc effectively, and if you can't do that, then you're basically wasting the rune. So
Yep.
really the best like, and also glacial's okay sometimes, but you know, you need to land stun, and if you miss stun, then it does nothing. So PTA is definitely the most effective early game, or like learning Taric, starting rune, because it's always going to be effective. And in lower elos, right, if you're facing you're going to face a lot more tanks. People are going to kite, you know, not as effectively, and because they're not going to kite as well, you're going to have more time that you're going to be able to auto attack them from melee range and don't have to worry about chasing them as much.
Hmm.
So
Yep, that definitely makes a
uh,
lot of sense for sure. I think
yeah, I
PTA
mean,
is pretty like a face value rune as well. Like you just see it do damage and you're like, okay, I do more damage now. Whereas like phase rush, obviously there's a bit of strategy behind phase rush. You're kind of like thinking in your head as a high elo player, you know, I'll proc phase rush, I'll back off here, wait till my CDs come back. Whereas like a low elo
right,
player, they just approach fights to like a face value, as I said before. So that makes a lot of
right.
sense, definitely. Yeah. Any other expansion? Sorry, you were going to say something after that.
Yeah, no, it's just you know, I if you look at the mobile fire guide, like the build I recommend for new players is Sunfire Bork, but that's just assuming that you know, you're facing a ton of tanks where Bork is going to be effective, and you know, you kind of play with, you know, Taric's, you know, ability to deal damage, because people think, oh man, it's just a support, he does no damage, but you know, when you pick up items like Wit's End or Death's Dance or Bork, and you know, you stay relatively, you know, healthy and alive while having damage, is you know, incredibly surprising to a lot of people how much damage Taric can deal. And he'll you know, even though he's a champion that is, you know, known for fighting with another champion and buffing them, he can very easily you know, 1v1 certain matchups. So yeah, definitely PTA.
Yep.
And I mean, obviously, if you're really interested in learning, I do coaching sessions, right? If you want, contact me on Discord or Pro Guides. I'm on both.
Yep.
And yeah, I do
And your mobile fly guide
I
as
do
well, right?
coaching. Right. Yeah. And you know, I just like, when it comes to Taric, you know, I'll teach mechanics first. So it's not just, we just don't hop into a game. It's more like I take people into practice tool and I teach them Taric's mechanics. You know, how, you know, like you're watching like the certain combos, like are you going to, you know, how, what order do you go? Like for like for example, it's like you E auto auto, W auto auto, Q auto auto until your E's off cooldown, and that's like the basic combo for clearing.
Mhm.
And you know, I'll teach all those, you know, a whole bunch of different mechanics there.
Yeah, getting the most kind of value out of your champion's kit. It's obviously pretty easy just to spam your abilities, but if you sequence them properly, they can be a lot higher value, as you've just said, like that, getting those autos in, all that kind of thing. Very,
Right.
very important. Yeah, I was literally the same with Riven when I started playing her. I didn't know that you had to auto between spells and stuff, and the champion just like seemed so weak. And then I learned to do that, and it just took the champion to a new level. So I empathize with having to get those autos in, and when you're having to learn your new champion. But it looks like you honestly just completely took over this game. You were in pretty much every single fight. I think you had like 70% KP. Literally no one could kill you. That was really crazy to watch, actually, especially with like such a unconventional build like your Death Dance, Wits, Frostfire. Like it's, yeah, crazy stuff.
Yeah. It's I might have built Dust Dance for just fun there, but yeah, it may be more where you were saying like how to play from behind. Maybe that's where I end up going for more supportive builds. But if you're ahead, then you can go for something a lot more aggressive,
Yep. Yep.
like that.
No, great. Well,
So I guess any like what questions did we miss? Anything? What are you still wanting to ask?
that actually rounds it out pretty well. I didn't really have too much at the bottom there, but I was going to say to everybody, as Light Rockets mentioned, guys, if you guys want more Taric resources, he has a mobile fire. I think you said a pro builds. Do you have a pro builds as well?
Yeah.
Or you're on pro
So
builds?
here, I'll just. I don't know if you're showing my screen on
I am,
screen,
yeah,
but
yeah. I'm showing
I'll
your
show.
screen.
So
Yep.
here's the mobile fire guide that we were mentioning, right? You can go here and, you know, that's the, you know, here's the PTA build I was talking about, where there's a variety of different builds
Mhm.
and lots of information, right? All these are going to have notes on them.
Yep.
As far as matchups, everything you want to know, like, you know, easiest way to go is, you know, it's right in front of me, might as well. I've got YouTube, Twitch. The spreadsheet is out of date. Maybe don't look at that so much, but definitely the Discord to contact me for coaching, or the pro guides. If I click this, it's not going to show, but here I'll just type in pro guides itself.
Mhm. That's okay. My Riven guide on Mobile Fire is actually the #1 Riven guide as well, funnily enough.
Is it?
Yeah.
I think mine is actually the second most. I think there's a really good one by a legislator that goes into Taric support a lot better. But other than that, I'm pretty sure I have the top spot
The top Taric
as
jungle,
a as a
jungle
as a,
guide.
as a Taric. Yeah. It just automatically brings me to my dashboard,
Yeah,
or not actually. But yeah, you can find me on here.
Yep, and then obviously YouTube and
it'll-
your stream as well, of course. Everything will be linked below, guys. Obviously a very knowledgeable resource. Lightrocket is as a player, knows a lot about his ins and outs of his champion and his playstyle as well. Thanks so much for coming on for the interview, man. It was really insightful.
Yeah.
Obviously love watching that gameplay as well. You guys can find this YouTube video with the complete interview on youtube.com/Rivalos. Going to be doing more of this kind of thing as well with other players that are exceptional at their champions like Lightrocket2. Thanks so much, man. Enjoy the rest of your stream. I really appreciate you coming on. I'll link you the video when you're done. I'll come in and it'll all be done and I'll put it in the chat.
Sounds good.
Cool.
I'll see you, man.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Thanks, chat. See you guys.
Peace.